What if I told you that by the time you think you're making a decision, your brain has already made it 7 seconds earlier? And what if that 7-second gap is where all manifestation actually happens? In a space between your subconscious and the quantum field that most people never even know exists. Yeah, I know it sounds impossible, like something straight out of a science fiction movie, but stick with me here because what you're about to discover is going to completely flip everything you thought you knew about how reality actually gets created. We're talking about documented scientific research from some of the most prestigious institutions in the world. Research that's so mind-blowing, it's literally rewriting the textbooks on consciousness, free will, and the very nature of reality itself. Welcome to Cosmic Sleep, where we dive deep into the hidden mysteries of existence that most people never even think to question. If you're someone who loves exploring the secret mechanics behind how reality actually works, you're definitely going to want to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And hey, I'm curious. Drop a comment if you've ever had one of those weird moments where you got exactly what you needed before you even realized you needed it. Trust me, after tonight's journey through the quantum realm of consciousness, you'll start recognizing these moments absolutely everywhere. Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into something extraordinary. I want to start with something that happened to me just last Tuesday that perfectly illustrates what we're talking about here. I was sitting in my car at a red light after an incredibly long day, completely zoned out and mentally exhausted, when suddenly I had this overwhelming urge to take a completely different route home. Not a thought, not a logical decision, just this inexplicable, almost physical pull to turn left instead of going straight like I had every single day for the past 3 years. My rational mind immediately kicked into overdrive with all the reasons why that was absolutely ridiculous. Left would take me straight through that nightmare construction zone on Maple Street that's been going on for months. Left would add at least 10 minutes to my commute, maybe 15 with all the traffic backups. Left made absolutely no logical sense whatsoever, especially when I was already exhausted and just wanted to get home to collapse on my couch. But something deeper than logic was insisting on this route change. It was almost like a physical sensation in my chest, this gentle but persistent pull toward the left turn. You know that feeling I'm talking about? When your body seems to know something that your mind hasn't figured out yet. When there's this quiet voice underneath all the mental chatter that's trying to tell you something important. So against every rational fiber of my being, against all my practical instincts about traffic patterns and time management, I turned left. 3 blocks down that supposedly inconvenient route, I saw something that literally made my heart skip several beats. A simple handwritten "For Rent" sign taped to the window of this little bookshop that I'd been secretly dreaming about for months. I'd driven past this place dozens of times before, always closed, always wondering what it would be like to have a creative workspace in that beautiful old building with its exposed brick walls and those tall windows that caught the morning light. Just right, the timing was absolutely perfect in the most impossible way. The owner happened to be outside at that exact moment, keys in hand, and when I pulled over and asked about the space, he said something that sent actual chills down my spine. "You're incredibly lucky you caught me right now. The previous tenant literally moved out this morning. I was just about to head home and put the listing online tonight. If I'd gone my usual route, if I'd listened to my logical mind, if I'd dismissed that inexplicable pull to turn left, I would have missed this opportunity completely. Someone else would have snatched it up within hours of it hitting the internet. Spaces like that in our town get grabbed immediately." But here's where this story gets really interesting from a neuroscience perspective, and why I'm sharing it with you as we dive into this exploration of quantum manifestation. When I got home that night and really sat with what had happened, I realized something profound that I'd completely missed in the moment. I'd been having fleeting thoughts about wanting a different workspace for weeks. Not conscious planning, not deliberate intention setting, just these passing moments where I'd feel this vague dissatisfaction with working from my cramped home office. Sometimes while making my morning coffee, I'd catch myself staring out the window and imagining what it would be like to have a space with more natural light, more room to spread out my projects. During afternoon walks around the neighborhood, I'd find myself looking at interesting buildings and wondering what it would feel like to have a creative sanctuary somewhere else, somewhere that felt more inspiring and connected to community. While falling asleep at night, I'd have these brief fantasies about a workspace that felt more alive, more conducive to the kind of deep creative work I wanted to be doing. But none of these thoughts seemed significant at the time. They were just mental wandering background noise, the kind of random thoughts everyone has when their minds drift. Looking back, though, I could see that some deeper part of my mind had been working on this problem for weeks, maybe months, long before my conscious awareness caught up to it. And more than just working on the problem, it had been communicating with something that was orchestrating circumstances in ways that my rational mind could never have planned or predicted. What I didn't know at the time, what I only learned later through diving deep into the research on this phenomenon, was that my subconscious had been picking up on information my conscious mind had completely missed, and it had been communicating with what quantum physicists call the quantum field of possibilities, influencing the probability patterns of future events in ways that seem impossible but are increasingly well documented by serious scientists. This isn't just personal anecdote or wishful thinking. Scientists at the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences in Leipzig have been studying this phenomenon for decades, using some of the most sophisticated brain monitoring equipment ever developed. They hook people up to high-resolution EEG machines and fMRI scanners and ask them to perform simple tasks: press a button, move their hand, make a choice between two options, and consistently across thousands of trials with hundreds of participants from different backgrounds and cultures. They can detect specific brainwave patterns up to 10 seconds before people report being consciously aware of their decision to act. 10 seconds doesn't sound like much when you first hear it, but in neural time, it's absolutely massive. Your brain processes information at incredible speeds. Individual neurons can fire up to 1,000 times per second, with billions of neurons working in parallel. In 10 seconds, millions of neural connections can activate, millions of pieces of information can be cross-referenced, millions of calculations can be performed by your subconscious processing systems. That's enough time for your deeper mind to scan your environment for opportunities you haven't consciously noticed. It's enough time to cross-reference your current situation with your deeper needs, desires, and values. It's enough time to evaluate thousands of potential futures and their likely outcomes based on patterns your conscious mind isn't even aware exist. And apparently, according to emerging research in quantum biology and consciousness studies, it's enough time to send some kind of information signal into what physicists call the zero-point field, the underlying fabric of reality, where all possibilities exist simultaneously until something causes them to manifest into concrete physical experience. Dr. Benjamin Libet, the pioneering researcher who first discovered this phenomenon back in the 1980s at the University of California, San Francisco, initially thought these findings meant human beings don't actually have free will. If our brains are making decisions and initiating actions before we're consciously aware of them, he wondered, are we really in control of our choices? Are we just sophisticated biological machines following predetermined scripts written by neural processes we're not even aware of? But as more researchers around the world began replicating and extending Libet's experiments with more advanced technology, they started noticing something even more fascinating and ultimately more hopeful. The people who scored highest on tests of intuition, creativity, emotional intelligence, and what psychologists call interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense internal bodily signals and subtle environmental cues, were consistently the ones whose brains showed the most pronounced activity in that pre-conscious decision window. It wasn't that these people lacked free will or were more mechanistic in their behavior. Quite the opposite. They had learned to trust and work with a deeper kind of knowing that operates faster and more comprehensively than conscious, rational analysis. They had developed sensitivity to information streams that exist below the threshold of ordinary awareness, but contain incredibly valuable guidance about how to navigate complex life situations. Dr. Antonio Damasio at the University of Southern California has spent decades studying this deeper decision-making process through his work with patients who have damage to their emotional processing centers. His research reveals something remarkable. Without access to emotional and somatic intelligence, the wisdom of the body and the unconscious mind, people literally can't make good decisions even when they have access to all the logical information they could possibly need. The famous Iowa gambling task perfectly illustrates this principle. Participants play a card game where they have to choose from 4 different decks of cards. 2 of the decks are rigged to produce big wins initially, but even bigger losses over time. The other 2 decks produce smaller wins, but also smaller losses, leading to better outcomes in the long run. People with intact emotional processing systems start avoiding the bad decks and gravitating toward the good decks long before they can consciously explain why those choices make sense. Their bodies literally know which choices to make before their minds figure out the underlying mathematical pattern. But people with damage to their emotional processing centers keep choosing from the rigged decks even after they consciously understand that those decks are mathematically designed to lose money over time. They know logically what they should do, but without access to their deeper knowing systems, they can't consistently act on that knowledge. This research suggests that optimal decision-making isn't just about rational analysis or conscious willpower. It's about integrating conscious reasoning with deeper forms of intelligence that process vast amounts of information below the threshold of awareness. Information about subtle environmental cues, bodily sensations, emotional patterns, relational dynamics, and apparently even quantum-level information about potential futures. Think about the implications of this for a moment. Your conscious mind processes maybe 40 bits of information per second. That sounds like a lot until you realize that your subconscious systems are processing approximately 11 million bits of information per second. That means 99.9996% of your reality processing is happening below the threshold of conscious awareness. And here's where it gets really wild. That deeper processing isn't just passive observation and analysis. According to emerging research in quantum biology, consciousness studies, and what some scientists call field effects, your subconscious mind appears to be actively communicating with information fields that extend beyond your individual brain and nervous system. These fields influence the probability patterns of events, encounters, and opportunities that show up in your physical experience, often long before your conscious mind even knows what it wants or needs. Dr. Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist and consciousness researcher at the University of Arizona, has proposed that consciousness arises from quantum computational processes in microscopic structures called microtubules that exist inside brain cells. These structures are smaller than anything we can observe with conventional microscopes, but they may function as biological quantum computers that process information in ways that classical physics can't explain. If Hameroff's theory is correct, and there's a growing body of experimental evidence supporting it, then your subconscious isn't just processing information from your immediate physical environment. It's potentially accessing what physicists call non-local information, data that exists in quantum fields that aren't limited by the speed of light or the normal constraints of space and time. This would mean that the urge I felt to turn left wasn't just random neural activity or emotional wishful thinking. It was my subconscious responding to information about potential futures that it had somehow detected through quantum processes that operate according to entirely different rules than the classical physics we learned about in school. This might sound like science fiction, but we're not talking about speculation or New Age mysticism here. We're talking about documented phenomena that are being studied with rigorous scientific methods at some of the most prestigious research institutions in the world. Institutes like Princeton's Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, Stanford Research Institute's Consciousness Studies Program, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and dozens of university laboratories around the globe have been documenting these effects for decades using the same statistical methods and experimental controls that are used in any other branch of serious scientific research. And once you understand how these quantum consciousness processes work, everything about manifestation starts to make sense in a completely different way. You stop trying to force outcomes through conscious effort and mental techniques. Instead, you learn to pay attention to the subtle guidance that's constantly arising from your deeper intelligence systems. You start trusting the wisdom of your body and your intuition over the limited analysis of your thinking mind. Most importantly, you begin to recognize that manifestation isn't something you do through conscious intention and visualization exercises. It's something that's already happening through the constant communication between your subconscious awareness and the quantum field of infinite possibilities. Your job isn't to make manifestation happen. Your job is to learn how to align with the manifestation processes that are already operating in your life, usually in ways that are far more sophisticated and beneficial than anything your conscious mind could orchestrate through effort and control. Let me tell you about Maria, because her story is going to perfectly illustrate everything we've been exploring about how your subconscious mind operates in ways that are far more sophisticated than most people ever realize. Maria came to me completely frustrated and exhausted after spending almost 2 years working with every manifestation technique she could get her hands on. And I mean everything. Vision boards covering every wall of her apartment, daily affirmation practices, elaborate visualization sessions, gratitude journals, scripting exercises where she'd write detailed descriptions of her ideal life as if it had already happened. She was intelligent, dedicated, and disciplined about her practice. She'd wake up every morning at 5:30 a.m. to do her visualization routine before work. She'd spend her lunch breaks writing in her manifestation journal. She'd end each day with gratitude practices and positive affirmations about her worthiness. To receive everything she was trying to create, but nothing was working. Actually, that's not quite accurate. She wasn't just failing to manifest what she wanted. She seemed to be getting the exact opposite of what she was putting all this conscious effort toward creating. She desperately wanted a romantic relationship. She'd created elaborate vision boards filled with images of happy couples, romantic dinners, and wedding scenes. She'd spend 20 minutes every morning visualizing her ideal partner, how he would look, how he would treat her, how it would feel to be loved and cherished by someone who truly understood her. But every dating experience left her feeling more frustrated and disconnected than before. She kept attracting men who were emotionally unavailable, commitment phobic, or just completely wrong for her in ways that were obvious to everyone except her in the moment. She'd get excited about someone new, only to discover that he was recently divorced and not ready for anything serious, or living in another city with no plans to relocate, or interested in a casual arrangement when she was looking for something deeper and more meaningful. She wanted financial abundance and security. She created detailed vision boards, showing herself debt-free, living in a beautiful home, taking luxury vacations, wearing expensive clothes. She'd repeat prosperity affirmations every day. Money flows to me easily and effortlessly. I am worthy of financial abundance. The universe provides for all my needs and desires. But instead of the financial flow she was visualizing, she kept facing unexpected expenses that ate up any savings she managed to accumulate. Her car would need major repairs right after she'd finally built up a small emergency fund. She'd get hit with medical bills from routine procedures that her insurance didn't cover as completely as she'd expected. Her apartment would need expensive maintenance that couldn't be postponed. She wanted creative fulfillment and recognition for her artistic talents. She'd been painting since college and was genuinely skilled, but she felt stuck in a creative block that seemed to get worse the harder she tried to break through it. She'd created vision boards showing her paintings in galleries, receiving positive reviews, connecting with other artists and collectors who appreciated her work. But she found herself sitting in front of blank canvases for hours without inspiration, second-guessing every artistic choice, feeling like a fraud pretending to be an artist. The few pieces she managed to complete felt forced and inauthentic, nothing like the flowing creative expression she'd experienced in college when art felt natural and effortless. "It's like the universe is actively working against me," she said. During our first session, her voice thick with frustration and confusion. "I'm doing everything right according to all the books and courses and YouTube videos. I'm visualizing clearly. I'm maintaining positive expectations. I'm taking inspired action when it presents itself. But instead of getting what I want, I keep getting situations that feel like cosmic jokes. What am I doing wrong?" I could hear the desperation in her voice, the exhaustion of someone who had followed all the rules but wasn't getting the promised results. And I recognized that particular flavor of frustration because I'd been there myself years earlier, when I first discovered that most popular manifestation teaching completely misses the most important part of how this process actually works. So, I suggested something that probably sounded completely crazy to someone who'd been working so hard to control her manifestation outcomes through conscious techniques. "For the next week," I told her, "don't do any of your regular manifestation practices. Don't visualize, don't affirm, don't work on your vision boards. Instead, I want you to become a detective, investigating your own subconscious choices." She stared at me like I'd just suggested she stop breathing or eating. "What do you mean, subconscious choices?" I thought the whole point was to make conscious choices about what I want to create. "That's exactly the assumption we need to question," I replied. "What if the reason your conscious manifestation efforts aren't working is because you're trying to manifest things that some deeper part of you is actually voting against?" I explained that for the next 7 days, I wanted her to carry a small notebook and pay careful attention to 3 specific categories of information that most people completely ignore. First, what thoughts arose naturally during quiet, unstructured moments, while taking a shower, walking without a destination, doing dishes, falling asleep, when she wasn't trying to think about anything in particular or direct her mental activity towards specific goals. Second, what her attention got drawn to throughout the day without any conscious effort or intention, articles that caught her eye, conversations she overheard that seemed especially relevant, things she noticed in her environment that seemed to call to her for no logical reason, books or movies that friends mentioned that sparked her curiosity. Third, what felt like a yes in her body versus what felt like a no, regardless of what her rational mind thought she should want or do. I wanted her to start paying attention to the physical sensations that arose when she considered different possibilities, the subtle expansion or contraction, the sense of energy and aliveness or depletion and resistance. But how is that going? To help me manifest the relationship and financial success and creative recognition that I actually want? She asked, clearly skeptical that this approach could be more effective than the visualization and affirmation techniques she'd been working with. That's exactly the question we need to investigate, I replied. What if what you think you want and what you actually need for your highest good and authentic fulfillment are two different things? What if your subconscious wisdom is already guiding you toward outcomes that serve your real interests, but your conscious mind is trying to override that guidance because it's attached to specific ideas about what success and happiness should look like? She looked doubtful, but agreed to try the experiment for 1 week. What did she have to lose at this point? Everything else had failed to produce the results she was hoping for. The discoveries that emerged from this simple investigation were absolutely fascinating and completely predictable once you understand how the quantum manifestation process actually works. When Maria stopped trying to direct her conscious manifestation efforts and started paying attention to her subconscious choices, a completely different picture of her authentic desires began to emerge. Regarding relationships, her subconscious kept gravitating towards solitude in ways that surprised her. Not loneliness or social isolation, but high-quality solitude that felt nourishing and restorative. She found herself naturally drawn to quiet coffee shops, where she could read undisturbed for hours. She'd feel a genuine sense of relief when social obligations got cancelled, giving her unexpected free time to spend alone. During her evening walks, she'd consistently choose the longer route through quiet residential streets rather than the busier commercial areas where she was more likely to run into people she knew and feel obligated to make conversation. When friends invited her to parties, networking events, or group activities, her body would often contract with a subtle no, even when her mind thought she should say yes because these events might lead to meeting potential romantic partners. Her attention kept getting drawn to articles and books about intentional living, mindfulness practices, solo travel, and spiritual development, topics that emphasized inner growth and self-discovery rather than external relationship building. She'd find herself reading stories of people who had taken sabbaticals from dating to focus on healing old wounds and developing a stronger sense of self. During quiet moments, especially right before falling asleep, thoughts would spontaneously arise about wanting space to process emotions from her last relationship that had ended badly, wanting time to rediscover who she really was outside of romantic partnerships, wanting to develop a genuinely loving and supportive relationship with herself before trying to share her life with someone else. But consciously, she'd been pushing herself toward dating apps, singles events, and social meetups, all while affirming her readiness for love and visualizing her ideal partnership. Can you see the fundamental conflict? Her conscious mind was trying to manifest a relationship while her subconscious wisdom was voting for a period of solitude and inner development. And guess which signal the universe was responding to? The pattern around money and career was even more revealing. Maria's attention kept getting drawn to stories of people who had simplified their lives, downsized their possessions, and found deeper satisfaction through minimalism and intentional living rather than material accumulation and financial success by conventional standards. She'd find herself lingering over articles about tiny house living, digital nomadism, people who had left high-stress careers to pursue work that felt meaningful, even if it paid less. She'd get excited reading about individuals who had chosen experiences and freedom over security and status symbols, During quiet moments, thoughts would arise about feeling overwhelmed by the possessions she already had, wanting to travel more, extensively, and have adventures that weren't possible when she felt tied down by expensive lifestyle commitments, feeling trapped by the financial obligations that required her to stay in a job that drained her energy, even though it paid well. Her body consistently said yes to spending money on experiences that expanded her world: workshops, concerts, weekend trips, classes that taught her new skills, but felt resistant to purchasing material possessions, even things she thought she needed for her apartment or wardrobe. But consciously, she'd been affirming her desire for financial abundance and visualizing herself with a bigger salary, a more expensive apartment, and luxury possessions that she thought would make her feel successful and secure. Once again, the conflict was obvious. Her conscious mind was trying to manifest more money and material success, while her subconscious wisdom was voting for simplicity, freedom, and experiences over possessions. The creative block pattern was perhaps the most illuminating of all. When Maria paid attention to her authentic creative impulses without trying to force them in particular directions, she discovered that her subconscious kept pulling her toward forms of artistic expression that had nothing to do with the successful, professional artist identity she'd been trying to manifest. She'd find herself writing long entries in her journal, not because she wanted to be a writer, but because putting words on paper helped her process emotions and make sense of complex life experiences. The writing felt therapeutic and clarifying rather than performance-oriented. She'd spontaneously start rearranging furniture and redecorating spaces in her apartment, not because she wanted to be an interior designer, but because something in her seemed to need to create more beauty and harmony in her immediate environment. These activities felt natural and satisfying, without any agenda about impressing others or building a career. She'd catch herself humming melodies while doing routine tasks, not because she wanted to be a musician, but because music seemed to arise organically from her body when she was relaxed and present to the moment. Her attention was repeatedly drawn to information about art therapy, creative writing workshops for personal development, and community art projects where the focus was on healing, self-expression, and connection, rather than commercial success or critical recognition. During quiet moments, thoughts would arise about wanting to use her creative gifts to help other people, to create beauty in everyday life, to express her authentic self, rather than trying to impress audiences or build a marketable artistic brand. But consciously, she'd been trying to force herself to create paintings that would sell in galleries, to develop a signature style that would appeal to collectors, to build a professional artistic career, even though that path felt increasingly foreign and uncomfortable. Her conscious mind was trying to manifest external recognition and commercial success as an artist, while her subconscious wisdom was voting for creative expression as a form of personal healing, authentic self-discovery, and service to others. Within just 3 weeks of paying attention to her subconscious choices instead of fighting against them with conscious willpower, Maria's entire life began shifting in ways that seemed almost magical from the outside, but made perfect sense once you understand how quantum manifestation actually operates. She started honoring her authentic need for solitude by saying no to social obligations that drained her energy and yes, to activities that genuinely nourished her spirit. Instead of feeling lonely or isolated, she discovered a quality of alone time that felt rich, restorative, and deeply satisfying. This shift created emotional and mental space for her to process feelings she'd been avoiding, to heal wounds from past relationships that she'd never fully addressed, to rediscover aspects of herself that she'd lost or suppressed in previous romantic partnerships. And as she developed a more loving, patient, and supportive relationship with herself, she began naturally attracting different kinds of people into her life. Not potential romantic partners. Her subconscious clearly wasn't ready for that level of intimacy yet, but soul friends, creative collaborators, mentors and guides who supported her journey of self-discovery rather than wanting her to be someone different than who she authentically was. She simplified her financial life by canceling subscriptions and memberships. She didn't really value selling possessions that felt like clutter rather than treasures, and choosing experiences over material accumulation. Instead of feeling deprived or like she was settling for less, she felt liberated and more aligned with her true values. The money she saved by simplifying allowed her to take workshops and classes that fed her soul, to plan travel experiences that expanded her perspective, and eventually to reduce her work hours so she could focus more energy on creative projects that felt meaningful, even if they weren't immediately profitable. Most significantly, she began expressing her creativity in ways that aligned with her subconscious preferences rather than her conscious career ambitions. She started a small creative writing group that met monthly in her apartment. She began making simple art pieces as gifts for friends and family members who were going through difficult transitions. She volunteered to help design and create beautiful spaces for a local community center that served low-income families. None of these activities generated income in the traditional sense, but they connected her with a community of like-minded people who valued depth, authenticity, and service over status and material success. They filled her with energy and inspiration rather than draining her, and they led to opportunities that she never could have planned or manifested through conscious effort. Within 6 months, one of the people in her writing group offered her a part-time position at a non-profit organization that combined writing, creativity, and community service, work that felt deeply meaningful and aligned with her values while also providing the financial stability she needed. The creative expression that had felt blocked when she was trying to force it into a successful artist framework began flowing naturally when she approached it as a form of authentic self-expression and service to others rather than a career-building strategy. And remarkably, as she developed a genuinely loving relationship with herself and began expressing her creative gifts from a place of authenticity rather than neediness or desperation for external validation, she started attracting romantic interest from men who were drawn to her depth, self-awareness, and creative passion rather than seeing her as someone to fix or save or change. None of these positive changes came from traditional manifestation techniques. They emerged naturally when she stopped fighting against her subconscious wisdom and learned to align her conscious choices with the guidance that was already arising from her deeper intelligence. Here's what was happening at the quantum level. As far as current research allows us to understand it, your subconscious mind has access to vastly more information than your conscious thinking can process. It's constantly scanning your environment, your relationships, your internal emotional and physical states, your past experiences, and even potential future scenarios, looking for patterns and possibilities that serve your authentic development and highest good. But it's not just passively collecting and analyzing information. According to emerging research in quantum biology and consciousness studies, your subconscious awareness is actively influencing the probability field of potential outcomes through what scientists call quantum observer effects and field interactions. Every moment of focused attention, and your subconscious is focusing attention millions of times per second on millions of different information streams, slightly increases the probability that certain possibilities will manifest into your concrete, physical experience. It's like a constant, incredibly sophisticated voting process where your deeper intelligence is casting ballots for experiences that will serve your growth, healing, and authentic self-expression. Your conscious mind, with its limited processing capacity and its tendency to be driven by fear, social conditioning, and short-term desires, often votes for outcomes that aren't actually in your best long-term interests. It wants what it thinks will make you happy, successful, or secure, based on very incomplete information about what those outcomes would actually feel like or lead to in your real life. But your subconscious, with its vast processing power and its connection to deeper wisdom that includes your body intelligence, emotional intelligence, intuitive intelligence, and what some researchers call morphic field intelligence, is usually voting for outcomes that support your authentic path, your deepest healing needs, and your unique contribution to the collective good. The problem is, most people have never learned to distinguish between their conscious wants and their subconscious knowing. They spend enormous amounts of energy trying to force outcomes that their deeper wisdom is actually voting against, which creates internal conflict and blocks the natural manifestation processes that could be working on their behalf. Real quantum manifestation happens when you learn to align your conscious intentions with the choices your subconscious is already making. It's not about forcing the universe to give you what your thinking mind decides it wants. It's about discovering what the larger intelligence of life wants to create through you and learning to become a conscious, willing participant in that more expansive creative process. Now, I need to talk about something that might sound a little strange if you're not familiar with cutting-edge physics research, but I promise this is going to connect everything we've discussed so far in a way that will completely revolutionize how you understand manifestation and your relationship with reality itself. There's this thing called the quantum field. Some scientists call it the zero-point field. Others refer to it as the quantum vacuum. And physicists love to debate the technical terminology. But essentially, it's this underlying fabric of reality where all possibilities exist simultaneously in what's called superposition until something causes them to collapse into concrete, measurable experience. For most of the 20th century, mainstream scientists thought this field was basically empty space, just a theoretical backdrop for real physics, like the stage where the actual drama of particle interactions takes place. It was considered a mathematical convenience rather than something that could have practical implications for how we experience life. But in the last few decades, research has revealed something absolutely extraordinary that's forcing us to completely reconsider the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. This field isn't empty at all. It's incredibly active, constantly fluctuating with what physicists call virtual particles that pop in and out of existence billions of times per second. It contains more energy than all the visible matter in the entire universe, and most remarkably for our purposes, it appears to be responsive to information, including the subtle forms of information generated by consciousness. Dr. Hal Puthoff at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Austin has spent over 40 years studying this phenomenon, with funding from NASA, the Department of Defense, and major technology corporations. He's not some fringe researcher operating on the margins of science. He has a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford. He's published hundreds of papers in peer-reviewed journals, and his work has been replicated by research teams around the world. Puthoff's research suggests that consciousness doesn't just passively observe reality like a camera recording events. Instead, it participates in creating reality through a constant, dynamic dialogue with this quantum information field. But here's the crucial part that most people miss. This dialogue isn't happening at the level of your conscious thoughts and intentions. It's occurring at much deeper levels of awareness that most people aren't even aware they have access to. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out in everyday life. Because without specific stories, This can all sound too abstract to be practically useful. My friend Jake is a musician who was struggling for almost 2 years to get performing opportunities that matched his level of talent and dedication. And I'm not just saying that as a supportive friend. Jake is genuinely gifted. He can play 6 different instruments at a professional level. He writes songs that have this rare quality of being both musically sophisticated and emotionally accessible. And when he performs live, he creates this intimate atmosphere that makes everyone in the room feel like they're part of something special. But for reasons that made no logical sense, none of that was translating into the kind of career opportunities that seemed to come easily to other musicians who were, frankly, less skilled and less dedicated than Jake. He'd spend hours every day working on his conscious manifestation practice. He had a detailed vision board showing himself performing at venues he wanted to play. He'd visualize sold-out shows, imagine the feeling of connecting with appreciative audiences, and affirm his success as a performer. He was taking all the practical actions that music industry advisors recommend, reaching out to venue owners, promoting his music on social media platforms, networking at industry events, submitting his songs to playlist curators and music blogs. He was doing everything right, according to both manifestation teaching and practical career advice. But instead of the breakthrough he was working toward, he seemed to encounter more obstacles. The harder he tried, venues wouldn't return his calls or emails. The few gigs he did manage to book would get cancelled at the last minute due to unforeseen circumstances. His social media posts were getting less engagement than ever. Other musicians who had started their careers after Jake was already established were getting opportunities that he couldn't seem to access, no matter how much effort he put into making connections and promoting his work. Jake was starting to question whether he was deluding himself about his abilities, whether maybe he just wasn't as talented as he thought and needed to accept that music would remain a hobby rather than a career. Then something interesting happened that initially seemed like another setback, but turned out to be the catalyst for everything changing. Jake's day job at a small local coffee shop required him to start working early morning shifts when they lost several employees at the same time. He'd never been a morning person. He was naturally inclined to stay up late and sleep until noon, so getting up at 4:30 a.m. to open the shop at 6 felt like torture at first. But after a few weeks of this new schedule, Jake started noticing something unexpected. During those quiet pre-dawn hours when he was alone in the coffee shop, moving through the familiar routine of preparing for the day on autopilot, his mind would often settle into this peaceful, receptive state that he'd never experienced before. He wasn't trying to manifest anything during these moments. He wasn't thinking about his music career or visualizing success or working on his goals. His conscious mind was basically in neutral, just present with the simple physical tasks of grinding coffee, arranging pastries, wiping down tables, adjusting lighting and music for the morning customers who would start arriving around 7:00. And in that state of relaxed, open awareness, things would arise that felt completely different from his usual conscious thinking processes. Not forced creative thoughts or strategic planning, but organic inspiration that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his individual mind. Melodies would appear fully formed, as if they'd been waiting for a quiet moment to emerge. Lyrics would crystallize around emotions and experiences he hadn't even realized he was processing. Connections between seemingly unrelated musical ideas would suddenly become obvious, leading to songs that felt more authentic and powerful than anything he'd created through conscious effort. More importantly, he started getting what he could only describe as knowings about where to be and when. Not logical plans or strategic decisions, but intuitive pulls towards certain places at certain times, certain conversations with certain people. Following these subtle promptings led to a series of coincidental encounters that launched his music. career in ways his conscious planning and manifestation efforts never could have orchestrated. One morning, while walking to work earlier than usual because he'd woken up before his alarm and felt drawn to leave the house immediately, Jake ran into someone he'd met briefly at a music event months earlier. They started talking about a new venue that was opening across town, and this person mentioned that the owner was looking for acoustic performers to play during their soft opening week. Jake had never heard of this venue, had no idea it was opening, and wouldn't have known to reach out about performance opportunities. But because he'd followed that inexplicable urge to leave for work early, he got the information and contact details before the opportunities were publicly announced. That led to a regular weekly gig at a venue that turned out to be exactly the right size and atmosphere for his style of music. The audiences were smaller than the large venues he'd been trying to book, but they were more engaged and appreciative. The intimate setting allowed his natural ability to connect with listeners to really shine. More importantly, that venue became a gathering place for other musicians, music lovers, and industry people who valued artistry and authenticity over commercial appeal. Within 6 months, Jake had developed relationships with collaborators, mentors, and supporters who opened doors to opportunities he never could have accessed through conventional networking and promotional strategies. None of this could have been planned or manifested through conscious intention and visualization. It emerged through Jake's willingness to trust subtle guidance that arose when his thinking mind stepped back and allowed a deeper intelligence to operate. Here's what I think was happening from a quantum field perspective, based on everything I've learned from researchers like Puthoff, Radin, and others who are studying consciousness field interactions. Jake's conscious mind, with all its goals and strategies and anxieties about career success, was broadcasting a very noisy, conflicted signal into the quantum field. It was like trying to have a clear conversation in a crowded restaurant with multiple loud conversations happening at nearby tables. Lots of competing information, very difficult to discern a coherent message that the field could respond to. Effectively, his conscious desires for recognition, financial success, and validation were mixed up with fears about rejection, worries about not being good enough, and attachment to specific outcomes that might not actually serve his highest good. This created what you might call signal interference that prevented clear communication between his individual consciousness and the larger field of possibilities. But during those quiet morning hours, when his personality mind settled down and his deeper awareness came online, Jake was broadcasting a much cleaner, more coherent signal into the field. His subconscious, with its vast processing capacity and its connection to his authentic creative essence, was communicating directly with the quantum field without interference from his mental noise and emotional reactivity. And the field was responding, not to his conscious desires for fame and recognition and financial success, but to his deeper intention to share authentic creative expression that touches people's hearts and contributes something meaningful to the world. The universe doesn't seem to care much about our ego's goals and ambitions, but it appears to be incredibly responsive to our soul's authentic desires and our willingness to serve something larger than our individual interests. This is why so many people struggle with traditional manifestation techniques that focus on getting what you consciously want. They're trying to broadcast their surface-level desires into a field that's actually listening to much deeper levels of intention and authenticity. Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has been studying this phenomenon for over 20 years using rigorous experimental protocols. His research consistently shows that consciousness can influence random events, affect physical systems at a distance, and apparently access information that shouldn't be available through normal sensory channels. But here's what makes his work Particularly relevant to our discussion, the effects are strongest when people are in coherent, relaxed states of consciousness rather than effortful, goal-oriented mental states. When participants try hard to influence the experimental apparatus through conscious intention and willpower, the effects are weaker or sometimes completely absent. But when they settle into meditative, open-hearted states and simply hold a gentle intention for the highest good of all involved, the statistical anomalies become much more pronounced and consistent. This suggests that effective manifestation isn't about forcing outcomes through mental effort. It's about learning to communicate with the quantum field from states of consciousness that are characterized by clarity, coherence, and authentic alignment with your deepest purposes. The field seems to respond most readily to what you might call coherent consciousness, states where your heart, mind, body, and spirit are aligned around intentions that serve not just your individual interests, but the greater good of the whole. When you're in this kind of coherent state, your consciousness becomes like a clear radio signal that the quantum field can receive and respond to, instead of the static and interference created by conflicted desires and ego-driven goals. You're broadcasting clean information about what wants to emerge through you in service of the highest good. This is why practices like meditation, spending time in nature, creative expression, and service to others are so powerful for manifestation. They help you access these deeper states of coherence where your individual consciousness can communicate effectively with the larger field of infinite possibilities. But the key insight here is that you don't have to understand exactly how this process works in order to benefit from it. You just need to learn to recognize and trust the subtle guidance that arises when you're in coherent states, and be willing to act on that guidance even when it doesn't make logical sense to your thinking mind. The quantum field is always listening. The question is, what kind of signal are you broadcasting, and are you in a state of consciousness that allows you to receive and act on the field's responses? The research I'm about to share with you literally changed how neuroscientists understand the relationship between consciousness and decision-making. And once you grasp what they discovered, you'll never think about free will, intention, or manifestation the same way again. It all started in the 1980s with a researcher named Benjamin Libet at the University of California, San Francisco. Libet was studying the timing of conscious awareness, and he designed what seemed like a remarkably simple experiment that would end up shaking the foundations of neuroscience and philosophy of mind. He had volunteers sit in front of a specially designed clock with a dot that moved around the clock face much faster than a normal second hand. It completed a full rotation in just 2.56 seconds. The task seemed straightforward. Whenever you feel like it, flex your wrist. But here's the crucial part. Pay close attention to exactly when you first become aware of your intention to move, and remember where that dot was on the clock face. At that precise moment, meanwhile, Libet had electrodes attached to the volunteers' scalps, measuring their brain activity in real time, plus sensors on their wrists to detect the exact moment their muscles began to contract. What he discovered was absolutely shocking to everyone involved, including Libet himself. The brain activity that preceded movement, something researchers call the readiness potential, began an average of 550 milliseconds before people reported being consciously aware of their intention to move. That's more than half a second, but here's where it gets even more mind-bending. When other researchers replicated Libet's experiment using more sophisticated brain monitoring equipment, they found that in some cases they could detect the neural signature of a decision up to 10 seconds before the person reported conscious awareness of deciding to act. Whole seconds. Let that sink in for a moment. Your brain is making decisions and preparing to act long before your conscious mind has any idea what's happening. You experience yourself as the decision maker, the one in control of your choices, but you're actually more like a narrator who creates a story about decisions that have already been made at much deeper levels of neural processing. When this research first came out, a lot of people completely freaked out. If our brains are making decisions before we're consciously aware of them, do we actually have free will? Are we just biological machines following pre-programmed scripts? Are all our choices just illusions created by neural processes we're not even aware of? Dr. Michael Gazzaniga, one of the leading researchers in cognitive neuroscience, spent decades exploring these questions. What he discovered is that the situation is both more complex and more hopeful than the initial interpretations suggested. Your conscious mind isn't the CEO of your brain making executive decisions from the top down. But it's not completely powerless either. Gazzaniga describes it more like the public relations department of a large, complex organization. It creates narratives about decisions that are made by a distributed network of specialized systems. But it also has what he calls veto power over actions that are inconsistent with your values and long-term interests. But here's what's really fascinating for anyone interested in manifestation. The researchers started looking more closely at who showed the longest delays between neural decision-making and conscious awareness. And they found something that nobody expected. People who scored highest on measures of intuition, mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and what psychologists call interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense subtle internal bodily signals, consistently showed the longest delays between brain activity and conscious awareness of deciding. These were also the people who reported feeling most free and empowered in their decision-making, most satisfied with their life choices, and most aligned with their authentic values and purposes. Think about the implications of that. The people who were most connected to their deeper intelligence, most trusting of their intuitive guidance, most aware of subtle internal signals, were the ones whose conscious minds were most willing to step back and allow deeper wisdom to operate. They weren't less free. They were more free because they'd learned to align their conscious intentions with the much more sophisticated decision-making processes that were operating below the threshold of awareness. Dr. Antonio Damasio's research with patients who have brain lesions provides another crucial piece of this puzzle. People who have damage to the neural connections between their rational thinking centers and their emotional processing systems literally cannot make good decisions, even when they have access to all the logical information they could possibly need. The famous case of Phineas Gage illustrates this perfectly. Gage was a railroad construction foreman whose personality completely changed after an accident that drove an iron rod through his skull, damaging his frontal cortex. Before the accident, he was known as a responsible, capable, well-liked leader. After the accident, even though his intellectual abilities remained intact, he became impulsive, unreliable, and incapable of making sound decisions about his work, relationships, or finances. More recent research using brain imaging technology has revealed what was happening. Gage had lost the neural connections that allow rational analysis to be informed by emotional intelligence, somatic awareness, and what researchers call somatic markers, subtle bodily sensations that guide us toward beneficial choices and away from harmful ones. Without access to these deeper guidance systems, conscious reasoning alone is actually quite poor at making complex life decisions that involve multiple variables, uncertain outcomes, and long-term consequences. This is why purely rational approaches to manifestation, trying to figure out logically what you want and then using willpower to pursue those goals, often lead to outcomes that feel unsatisfying even when you technically achieve what you thought you wanted. Your rational mind simply doesn't have access to enough information to make truly optimal choices about complex life situations. It can't process the millions of subtle environmental cues, internal signals, relational dynamics, and potential future consequences that your subconscious systems are constantly evaluating. But here's where this research gets really practical for understanding how manifestation actually works in real life. Let me tell you about an experiment that Dr. Ap Dijksterhuis conducted at the University of Amsterdam that perfectly illustrates why trusting your deeper decision-making processes often leads to better outcomes than conscious analysis and deliberation. Dijksterhuis had participants make decisions about complex scenarios, like choosing between different apartments that varied on multiple dimensions: rent, location, size, amenities, neighborhood characteristics, and so on. Each apartment had both positive and negative features, and the optimal choice required weighing numerous trade-offs. Some participants were given time to consciously analyze all the information and make a rational decision based on careful consideration of the pros and cons. Others were given the same information, but then distracted with unrelated tasks that prevented conscious deliberation. They had to make their decision based on their immediate impression or gut feeling. Remarkably, the people who were prevented from conscious analysis consistently made better decisions. When researchers followed up months later, the participants who had chosen based on their initial impressions were more satisfied with their choices and less likely to experience buyer's remorse than those who had made carefully reasoned decisions. This doesn't mean that conscious thinking is useless or that you should make all decisions impulsively. What it suggests is that your subconscious processing systems are much better at integrating complex information and evaluating trade-offs than your conscious analytical mind. When you try to force important life decisions through conscious reasoning alone, you're essentially trying to do with 40 bits per second of processing capacity what your subconscious can do with 11 million bits per second. But here's the key. Insight for manifestation. Those gut feelings and immediate impressions aren't random or irrational. They're the result of incredibly sophisticated information processing that's happening below the threshold of conscious awareness. Your subconscious mind is constantly scanning your environment, your internal states, your past experiences, your values, your long-term goals, and even potential future scenarios that you haven't consciously considered. It's evaluating thousands of factors simultaneously and arriving at conclusions that take into account information your conscious mind couldn't possibly process in a reasonable amount of time. And according to the emerging research we discussed earlier, this subconscious processing isn't limited to information that's immediately available in your physical environment. It appears to include what researchers call non-local information, data about potential futures, probable outcomes, and opportunities that don't yet exist in physical reality, but could potentially manifest given the right conditions. This is why people often report having strong intuitive hunches about decisions that turn out to be remarkably prescient. It's not psychic ability in the supernatural sense, it's the natural result of subconscious processing systems that can access and integrate vastly more information than conscious awareness can handle. When you learn to trust these deeper guidance systems, instead of overriding them with conscious analysis and control, you're essentially aligning yourself with decision-making processes that have access to information streams you couldn't access any other way. But there's a catch. These deeper systems only operate optimally when you're in states of consciousness characterized by relaxation, openness, and what researchers call diffuse attention, rather than focused, goal-oriented mental activity. When you're stressed, anxious, or trying hard to figure something out through conscious effort, you actually interfere with the natural operation of these deeper intelligence systems. It's like trying to hear a quiet conversation while a loud television is playing in the same room. The signal is still there, but it gets drowned out by mental noise. This is why so many wisdom traditions emphasize practices like meditation, contemplation, spending time in nature, and other activities that quiet the thinking mind and allow deeper awareness to emerge. These aren't just stress reduction techniques. They're technologies for accessing levels of intelligence that can guide you toward choices and actions that serve your highest good in ways your conscious mind could never plan or predict. The 7-second gap that Libet discovered isn't empty time where nothing is happening. It's a window into a level of decision-making that's far more sophisticated than conscious reasoning, but only accessible when you're willing to trust processes that operate beyond the control of your thinking mind. Learning to work with this gap, to recognize and trust the guidance that arises before conscious analysis kicks in, is one of the most powerful manifestation skills you can develop. It's how you align your individual will with the larger intelligence that's constantly orchestrating synchronicities, opportunities, and experiences that serve your authentic growth and contribution. There's this space, this gap, between the moment your deeper intelligence sets an intention and the moment you become consciously aware of that intention. And I'm convinced that this gap is where all the real manifestation magic happens. It's like a secret chamber in consciousness where your individual awareness interfaces with the quantum field of infinite possibilities. Most people experience this gap as a kind of mysterious lag time where they can't quite explain why they suddenly want something or feel drawn toward a particular choice. They'll say things like, "I don't know why, but I just felt like I needed to call you," or "something told me to take a different route home," or "I had this weird urge to check my email right at that moment." But what if that gap isn't empty time, where nothing significant is happening? What if it's actually packed with incredibly sophisticated quantum communication between your consciousness and the underlying field of reality that shapes what shows up in your physical experience? Dr. Jacobo Grinberg, a Mexican neuroscientist who studied consciousness for decades before mysteriously disappearing in 1994, had a fascinating theory about this phenomenon. He proposed that consciousness doesn't just happen inside your individual brain. It emerges from the interaction between your neural activity and what he called the pre-space, a kind of quantum information field that underlies all physical reality. According to Grinberg's research, the more coherent your consciousness becomes, meaning the more all the different parts of your brain and nervous system start working in synchronized harmony, the more directly you can interface with this pre-space field. And in that interface, intentions can influence reality at the quantum level before they even register in conscious awareness. I know this sounds incredibly abstract and theoretical, so let me tell you about a specific experiment that Grinberg conducted that demonstrates this principle in action in ways that are impossible to explain through conventional neuroscience. He had pairs of people sit in separate rooms that were electromagnetically shielded to prevent any normal form of communication between them. One person would be shown a series of flashing lights while their brain activity was recorded with EEG equipment. The other person would simply sit quietly in their separate room, also connected to brain monitoring equipment, with no conscious knowledge of when the lights were flashing for their partner. What Grinberg discovered was remarkable. When the two people had developed what he called neuronal synchrony, through spending time together, meditating together, or simply developing a strong interpersonal connection, the brain of the person not seeing the lights would show neural responses that correlated with the light flashes their partner was experiencing. But here's the really wild part that relates directly to what we're discussing about the gap between intention and awareness. These neural correlations often occurred before the person seeing the lights consciously registered the flash. The receiving person's brain was responding to information that hadn't yet reached even their partner's conscious awareness. This suggests that at some level of consciousness deeper than ordinary awareness, human beings are connected through quantum information fields that can transmit data faster than normal neural processing. Information, including intentions, can propagate through these fields and influence other consciousness systems before it even reaches conscious awareness in the originating person. Now, what does this mean for understanding how manifestation actually works in your everyday life? I think it means that when you set an intention from a deep, coherent state of consciousness, not just thinking about what you want, but embodying a genuine alignment with your authentic purpose and highest good, that intention doesn't stay locked inside your individual mind. It ripples out into the quantum field of consciousness, influencing the probability patterns of events, encounters, and opportunities that will show up in your experience and in the experiences of people connected to you. But here's the crucial insight. This process seems to work best when your conscious mind isn't trying to control or direct it. The interference patterns created by anxiety, attachment, and effortful thinking seem to disrupt the natural flow of quantum communication between individual consciousness and the larger field. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle in a way that's both practical and profound. My friend Rachel is an artist who spent years struggling to make a living from her creative work. She tried everything that business coaches and art marketing experts recommend: building an online presence, networking with galleries and collectors, participating in art fairs, creating work that fit current market trends. She was working harder than ever, but her income from art was actually decreasing. The more effort she put into promotion and marketing, the less authentic her creative process felt, and the less connected she felt to the work she was producing. Then Rachel went through a difficult breakup that forced her to step back from all her hustling and promotional activities. She was emotionally devastated and financially stressed, but she was also too drained to continue the intense effort she'd been putting into building her art career. In this raw, vulnerable state, something interesting started happening. Rachel kept painting, not because she had any plan or strategy, but because it was the only thing that helped her process the complex emotions she was experiencing. The work became deeply personal, honest, and emotionally authentic in ways that her previous marketable pieces had never been. She wasn't painting for an audience or trying to create work that would sell. She was painting from the depths of her being, expressing feelings and insights that she couldn't communicate any other way. And in this space of authentic creative expression without agenda, Rachel began having experiences that can only be described as quantum synchronicities. She would wake up in the morning with a clear sense of what colors she needed to work with that day, or what emotion wanted to be expressed through paint and canvas. Not thoughts or plans, but embodied knowings that arose before her conscious mind had a chance to analyze or direct her creative choices. Following these subtle promptings led to artwork that felt more alive and powerful than anything she'd created. When she was trying to control the process through conscious intention and strategic planning. But the really remarkable part was what started happening in the external world. Even though Rachel wasn't actively promoting her work or seeking out sales opportunities, people began finding her art and responding to it in ways that had never happened when she was trying so hard to market herself. A gallery owner saw one of her new paintings at a friend's house and asked to meet Rachel to discuss representation. Someone noticed her work on Instagram. She'd started posting her new pieces without any marketing strategy, just as a way of documenting her creative process, and commissioned a piece for their new home. A local coffee shop owner who happened to see Rachel painting in a park invited her to display her work in the cafe. That led to connections with other artists, collectors, and creative professionals who appreciated the authenticity and emotional depth of her new direction. Within 6 months of stopping her conscious marketing efforts and trusting her authentic, creative impulses, Rachel's art income had tripled. More importantly, she felt deeply aligned with her work and connected to a community of people who valued art as authentic expression rather than just decoration or investment. None of this could have been planned or manifested through conscious strategy. It emerged through Rachel's willingness to trust the creative intelligence that operates in the gap between intention and awareness, and to allow that intelligence to orchestrate outcomes that served not just her individual needs, but the larger ecosystem of people who were hungry for authentic artistic expression. Here's what I think was happening from a quantum consciousness perspective. When Rachel was trying to force outcomes through conscious effort and strategic thinking, her intention was contaminated by fear, desperation, and attachment to specific results. This created what you might call energetic noise that interfered with the clean communication between her deeper creative purpose and the quantum field of possibilities. Her conscious mind was basically shouting demands at the universe. I need to make money from my art. I need recognition. I need security. And that energetic desperation was actually pushing away the very opportunities she was trying to attract. But when she stepped back from conscious control and began creating from pure authenticity, her deeper intention to share her creative gifts could communicate directly with the field without interference from her personality mind's fears and agendas. In the gap between her unconscious intention to serve through authentic creative expression and her conscious awareness of that intention, quantum manifestation processes could operate without the static created by mental effort and emotional attachment. This is why so many wisdom traditions emphasize the importance of surrendering personal will to what they call divine will, cosmic intelligence, or the Tao. It's not about becoming passive or giving up on your dreams and aspirations. It's about learning to trust the deeper intelligence that operates in that mysterious gap between intention and awareness. That intelligence has access to information about timing, connections, opportunities, and synchronicities that your conscious mind could never predict or orchestrate. But it can only operate freely when your personality mind stops trying to control outcomes and allows the larger creative process to unfold. The gap between intention and conscious awareness isn't empty space. It's the workshop where the universe crafts the perfect circumstances for your authentic gifts to find their way into the world in service of the highest good for everyone involved. Learning to trust what happens in that gap and to align your conscious choices with the guidance that emerges from it is perhaps the most important manifestation skill you can develop. Einstein famously called it spukhafte Fernwirkung, spooky action at a distance. He was referring to quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where two particles become correlated in such a way that measuring one instantly affects the other, regardless of how far apart they are in space or time. Einstein didn't like this idea because it seemed to violate his theory of relativity, which says nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. He spent years trying to prove that quantum entanglement was impossible, that there had to be some kind of hidden local mechanism that could explain these correlations without requiring instantaneous communication across vast distances. But decades of increasingly sophisticated experimentation have proven beyond any reasonable doubt that entanglement is real, and it's one of the most well-established and practically useful facts in quantum physics. It's the foundation for emerging technologies like quantum computing, quantum cryptography, and quantum teleportation. But here's what most people don't realize, and what has profound implications for understanding how consciousness and manifestation actually work. Entanglement isn't just something that happens with particles in high-tech physics laboratories. It appears to be a fundamental feature of reality that operates at every level of organization, including the level of consciousness and human experience. Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has been studying what he calls consciousness entanglement for over 20 years, using rigorous experimental protocols that meet the same statistical standards used in any mainstream scientific research. In one of his most replicated experiments, Radin has pairs of people sit in separate, electromagnetically shielded rooms. One person looks at a series of images on a computer screen, some emotionally neutral, like pictures of landscapes or everyday objects, and others emotionally intense, like scenes of violence, eroticism, or natural disasters. The other person simply relaxes in their separate room, with sensors measuring their autonomic nervous system activity, heart rate, skin conductance, brain waves, and other indicators of physiological arousal that normally change when we're emotionally stimulated. What Radin has found consistently across thousands of trials is that when the first person views an emotionally intense image, the second person's body often responds with measurable changes in physiological arousal, even though they have no sensory access to what their partner is seeing and no conscious knowledge that anything significant is happening. But here's the part that's going to blow your mind and directly relates to everything we've been exploring about quantum manifestation. These physiological responses sometimes occur before the first person even sees the image. The second person's nervous system is responding to emotional events that haven't happened yet. This suggests that consciousness doesn't just operate in linear time, the way our everyday experience would lead us to believe. At the quantum level, information can flow backwards through time, creating what Radin calls presentiment, the ability of consciousness to sense and respond to future events before they occur in the physical timeline. Now, you might be thinking, that's fascinating, but what does this have to do with manifestation and practical life circumstances? Everything. If consciousness can become entangled across space and time, then your intentions and the quality of your awareness don't just affect your own future experiences. They can influence the entire web of relationships, circumstances, and opportunities that make up the reality you're experiencing. Your consciousness is not isolated inside your individual brain. It's part of a vast, interconnected field of awareness that includes every person you've ever met, every situation you've ever been part of, and every potential future that could emerge from your current circumstances. When you set intentions from deep, authentic alignment with your highest purpose, those intentions become part of this entangled field of consciousness. They influence not just your own thoughts and behaviors, but the thoughts, behaviors, and choices of everyone whose life intersects with yours in ways that create opportunities for those intentions to manifest. Let me tell you about something that happened to me that perfectly illustrates this principle in action. About 5 years ago, I was going through a period of feeling creatively stuck and professionally isolated. I'd been working on a project for months that wasn't coming together the way I'd envisioned. I felt disconnected from the creative community I'd been part of for years, and I was starting to question whether I was on the right path with my work. One evening, I was sitting in meditation, not trying to solve anything or manifest any particular outcome, just sitting with the feelings of frustration and uncertainty. And in that quiet space, without any effort or intention on my part, this clear knowing arose. Not a thought, but more like a recognition that I wanted to be part of something larger than my individual projects. I wanted to collaborate with other, creative people in ways that would allow me to contribute my gifts while learning from theirs. I didn't turn this into a formal manifestation practice. I didn't create vision boards or affirmations or take specific action steps. I just held this intention lightly, like a gentle wish floating in the background of my awareness. and continued with my regular life and work. 2 weeks later, completely out of the blue, I got an email from someone I'd never met. She'd found my work through a mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, and was reaching out about a collaborative project she was organizing. It was exactly the kind of meaningful, creative collaboration I'd been longing for, involving several people whose work I'd been following and admiring from a distance, but had never met personally. But here's the really spooky part that directly relates to what we're discussing about consciousness entanglement. When I met the other collaborators and we started sharing our stories about how we'd each gotten involved in this project, it turned out that 3 of us had all set very similar intentions for creative collaboration within a few days of each other. We'd all been feeling isolated and creatively stuck around the same time. We'd all independently opened to the possibility of finding our creative tribe and contributing to something larger than our individual projects. And we'd all done this without knowing that the others existed or were having similar experiences. It was as if our individual intentions had somehow become entangled in the quantum field of consciousness, creating a kind of collective magnetic pull that drew us together through what appeared to be a series of random coincidences, but felt more like a carefully orchestrated synchronicity. The person who organized the project later told us that she'd had a vivid dream about bringing together a specific group of creative collaborators, and when she woke up, she felt compelled to reach out to people she'd never contacted before, including me. She couldn't explain logically why she felt drawn to invite certain people, but she trusted the intuitive prompting and acted on it. This is what I mean by consciousness entanglement and quantum manifestation. Your intentions don't exist in isolation inside your individual mind. They become part of a web of interconnected awareness that includes everyone whose life path has the potential to intersect with yours in meaningful ways. When intentions align at the quantum level, when multiple people are authentically open to similar possibilities, reality reorganizes itself to bring those intentions into physical manifestation through chains of events that appear coincidental, but are actually examples of what Jung called synchronicity, meaningful connections that can't be explained by linear causation. But here's the crucial insight that determines whether this process works in your favor or creates frustrating obstacles. This quantum entanglement of consciousness responds most readily to intentions that arise from authentic alignment with your deeper purpose, rather than surface-level desires driven by fear, ego, or social conditioning. When you're trying to manipulate reality to get something you think you need for your security, status, or validation, your intention is contaminated by attachment and desperation. This creates what you might call static in the quantum field that interferes with the natural flow of synchronicity. It's like trying to tune into a radio station while there's electrical interference. The signal is still being broadcast, but it gets distorted by noise that makes clear communication impossible. But when your intention arises from genuine alignment with your authentic purpose and desire to contribute something meaningful to the world, your consciousness becomes entangled with what some researchers call the morphic field of collective human evolution and creativity. Your individual intention aligns with the larger intelligence that's constantly working to bring forth new possibilities, solutions, and creative expressions that serve the highest good of the whole. And when your personal desires are in harmony with this larger creative process, the entire universe seems to conspire to help you manifest what you're called to contribute. This is why people often report that their most fulfilling manifestations happened when they stopped trying to control outcomes and started asking questions like, how can I serve? Or what wants to emerge through me? Instead of, how can I get what I want? When you align your individual will with the creative intelligence of the cosmos, you gain access to resources, connections, and opportunities that no amount of personal effort could create. You become part of the spooky action at a distance that's constantly weaving the fabric of reality in service of consciousness evolution and the emergence of higher possibilities. Here's something that's going to fundamentally challenge everything you think you know about the relationship between your inner world and the external reality you experience every day. In quantum physics, there's a principle called the observer effect, which demonstrates that the act of observation actually changes what's being observed at the most fundamental level of reality. The classic example that every physics student learns about is the famous double-slit experiment. When scientists shoot particles like electrons or photons at a screen with two narrow slits, something absolutely mind-bending happens. If nobody is watching to see which slit each particle goes through, the particles behave like waves and create an interference pattern on the detection screen. They literally pass through both slits simultaneously and interfere with themselves. But the moment you set up any kind of detector to observe which slit each particle passes through, the wave function collapses and the particles start behaving like solid objects that go through one slit or the other. The interference pattern completely disappears. The act of observation fundamentally changes the nature of physical reality. For decades, physicists argued about what exactly constitutes observation in this context. Does it have to be conscious, human observation, or does any kind of measurement equipment that records information cause the wave function to collapse? Most mainstream physicists concluded that consciousness isn't special. Any physical interaction that creates a permanent record of information is sufficient to collapse quantum possibilities into definite outcomes. But some researchers started wondering, what if consciousness plays a more fundamental role in this process than we've been willing to acknowledge? What if the observer effect isn't just about measurement and information recording, but about the quality and intention of awareness itself? Dr. Amit Goswami, a quantum physicist and professor emeritus at the University of Oregon, has spent his entire career exploring this question. His research and theoretical work suggest that consciousness isn't produced by matter, as materialist science assumes. Instead, he proposes that matter emerges from consciousness through the process of observation and quantum wave function collapse. This sounds incredibly abstract and philosophical, but it has profound practical implications for how we understand manifestation, the power of attention, and your ability to influence your life circumstances through the quality of awareness you bring to different situations. Let me share a story that illustrates how this works in everyday life in ways that are both practical and transformational. My friend David is a therapist who specializes in working with people who have chronic pain conditions that haven't responded well to conventional medical treatments. For years, he used standard approaches, helping clients manage their thoughts about pain, teaching relaxation and stress reduction techniques, working through emotional trauma that might be contributing to physical symptoms. He was good at what he did and genuinely cared about his clients, but he felt like something was missing from his approach. Many people would make some initial progress, but then they'd plateau and remain stuck with baseline levels of pain and limitation that significantly impacted their quality of life. Then David started learning about the observer effect and quantum approaches to healing, and he began experimenting with bringing these principles into his therapeutic work in ways that were both scientifically grounded and practically applicable. Instead of focusing on pain as a problem to be solved or eliminated, David started guiding clients to observe their pain with a completely different quality of attention. Not the anxious, resistant, I need to make this go away attention that most people bring to uncomfortable sensations, but curious, accepting, even compassionate attention. The results were remarkable and consistently surprised both David and his clients. When people learn to observe their pain without trying to change it, something extraordinary would begin to happen. The pain would often start to shift on its own, not necessarily disappearing completely, but transforming in quality, intensity, and meaning in ways that made it much more manageable and less distressing. One client, Sarah, had been dealing with chronic back pain for 15 years following a car accident. She'd tried everything conventional medicine had to offer: multiple surgeries, every pain medication available, physical therapy, chiropractic treatment, massage therapy, acupuncture. The pain was always there, usually hovering around a 6 or 7 on a 10-point scale, making it difficult for her to work, exercise, or fully engage with her family and friends. David guided Sarah through a deceptively simple exercise. Instead of trying to distract herself from the pain or push it away with mental resistance, she learned to place her attention gently on the painful area and observe it with the same kind of loving, patient attention she might give to a crying child who needed comfort rather than criticism. Within minutes of this shift in the quality of her observation, Sarah's pain began to change in ways that neither she nor David had expected. Not the intensity at first, but the character. Instead of feeling sharp and stabbing, like something was wrong and needed to be fixed, it began to feel more like a dull ache that had important information to communicate. Instead of feeling foreign and invasive, like an enemy that had invaded her body, it started feeling like a part of herself that had been trying to get her attention for years, but hadn't known how to communicate except through increasing levels of discomfort. Over several sessions of this kind of conscious, compassionate observation, Sarah's pain not only decreased significantly, but she began to understand what her body had been trying to tell her. The pain was connected to areas of her life where she felt unsupported and overwhelmed. She was carrying emotional burdens that were manifesting as physical tension and inflammation. As she addressed these deeper life circumstances with the same gentle, observational awareness she'd learned to bring to her physical symptoms, her pain continued to improve. 6 months later, she was pain-free for the first time in 15 years and had developed a completely different relationship with her body based on listening and responding rather than fighting and controlling. Here's what I think was happening from a quantum consciousness perspective, based on everything we've learned about the observer effect and its relationship to manifestation. Sarah's anxious, resistant attention to her pain was functioning like a quantum detector that was collapsing the wave function of her experience into a fixed pattern of suffering. Her consciousness was locked into observing her pain through the lens of, "This is wrong, this shouldn't be happening, I need to make this stop." That quality of observation was literally creating and maintaining the reality of chronic pain by collapsing the quantum field of possibilities into the single outcome that matched her fearful expectations. But when she shifted to curious, compassionate observation, when she began paying attention to her pain as information rather than as an enemy, she was creating space for new possibilities to emerge from the quantum field of potential experiences. Her pain wasn't just a mechanical problem in her physical body. It was information arising from the intersection of her consciousness, her life circumstances, her emotional patterns, and her body's wisdom about what needed attention and care. By changing the quality of her observation, Sarah was literally changing the reality of her experience at the quantum level. She was accessing possibilities for healing and understanding that couldn't manifest through her previous pattern of fearful, resistant attention. This principle extends far beyond physical healing to every aspect of your life experience. The quality of attention you bring to your relationships, your work, your financial situation, your creative projects, and your life challenges directly influences what possibilities can manifest in those areas. If you observe your relationships from a place of fear and scarcity, constantly watching for signs of rejection, betrayal, or disappointment, you're collapsing the wave function of relational possibility into patterns that confirm your fears and expectations. But if you can, learn to observe your relationships from a place of curiosity and appreciation, paying attention to moments of connection, growth, genuine care, and mutual support, you create space for new possibilities to emerge that couldn't manifest through your previous pattern of fearful observation. The same principle applies to your financial situation, your career, your health, and any other area of life where you'd like to see positive change. The universe isn't just objectively out there waiting for you to observe it. It's a field of infinite possibilities that becomes concrete reality through the alchemy of consciousness and attention. But here's the crucial point that determines whether this process works in your favor. This isn't about positive thinking or trying to force yourself to see things differently than they actually are. It's about recognizing that your current reality is already the result of how you've been observing, and that shifting the quality of your attention can open up new possibilities that were always there but couldn't manifest through your previous pattern of observation. This is why contemplative practices like meditation, mindfulness, and what some traditions call witnessing consciousness are so powerful for transformation. They're not just stress reduction techniques or spiritual practices. They're technologies for developing the quality of attention that allows new realities to emerge from the quantum field of infinite possibility. When you learn to observe your experience with awareness that's spacious, curious, and free from the need to control outcomes, you become a different kind of observer. And according to quantum physics, different observers collapse the wave function of possibilities into different realities. The universe is not separate from your consciousness. You're not just observing reality. You're participating in creating it through every moment of attention, every quality of awareness, every choice about how to relate to what you're experiencing. This is both an incredible opportunity and a profound responsibility. The reality you're experiencing right now is, in large part, the result of how you've been observing, and the reality you'll experience in the future will be influenced by how you choose to observe in this moment. We've covered a lot of ground together on this journey, from the neuroscience of preconscious decision-making to quantum entanglement to the observer effect that shows how consciousness literally shapes reality. But now, I want to bring all of these insights together and talk about what actually happens when you start living from this deeper understanding of how manifestation really works. There's a moment in every person's awakening to quantum consciousness. And make no mistake, understanding how reality actually operates is fundamentally a spiritual awakening. When you realize that your thinking mind is not the director of your life experience, it's more like a passenger on a ship that's being navigated by a vastly more intelligent captain who has access to information about weather patterns, ocean currents, and destinations that the passenger can't even imagine. This realization can be absolutely terrifying at first, especially if you've built your entire identity around being smart, strategic, and in control of your circumstances. If your conscious mind isn't running the show, who or what is? What if this deeper intelligence makes choices that your personality mind doesn't like or understand? What if surrendering conscious control leads to chaos, failure, or loss of everything you've worked to build? But for those who have the courage to move through this fear and learn to trust the deeper intelligence that's actually orchestrating their experience, something extraordinary happens that can only be described as miraculous from the perspective of conventional thinking about how life works. Life stops feeling like a constant struggle against circumstances and becomes more like a dance with the creative intelligence of the universe itself. Instead of swimming upstream against the current of reality, you learn to move with the flow of quantum possibilities in ways that seem almost magical to people who are still trying to control outcomes through conscious effort. Let me tell you about the most profound example of this transformation I've ever witnessed personally. My friend Elena was a successful investment banker who had built her entire identity around being in control of every variable she could possibly manage. She had 10-year career plans with quarterly milestones, daily schedules optimized down to the minute, financial spreadsheets that tracked every penny of income and expenses, and contingency plans for contingency plans. And it worked, at least by conventional standards. She was financially successful, respected in her profession, living in a beautiful apartment, driving a luxury car, taking expensive vacations. From the outside, she seemed to be living the American dream of achievement and material security. But inside, Elena felt empty, exhausted, and increasingly disconnected from any sense of meaning or authentic purpose. She was spending 70 hours a week managing money for people who already had more than they could spend in multiple lifetimes, while feeling like her own life was passing by without her really living it. Then Elena started having what she later described as a quantum awakening, triggered by a series of synchronicities that were too numerous, too precise, and too meaningful to dismiss as random coincidence. It started small. She would think of someone she hadn't spoken to in years, and they would call or email that same day. She would have a fleeting thought about needing information on a particular topic, and the exact book, article, or conversation she needed would appear in her experience within hours. But then the synchronicities became more profound and life-altering. She would feel inexplicably drawn to attend certain events or visit certain places with no logical reason, and these apparently random choices would lead to encounters that began shifting the entire direction of her life. At first, Eleanor tried to analyze and control these experiences. She started keeping a detailed synchronicity journal, looking for patterns and trying to figure out how to reproduce the effect consciously. She approached her quantum awakening the same way she approached everything else, as a problem to be solved and a system to be optimized. But the more she tried to manage and direct the process with her analytical mind, the less it worked. The synchronicities would fade when she approached them with her controlling, strategic consciousness. It was like trying to grasp water with her hands. The harder she squeezed, the more it slipped away. Finally, out of exhaustion and frustration, with her inability to control something that was clearly more intelligent than her conscious planning, Eleanor decided to try something that went against every instinct her successful career had reinforced. She decided to stop trying to control outcomes and start trusting the deeper intelligence that seemed to be orchestrating these mysterious connections and opportunities. She began making decisions not based on logical analysis, strategic planning, or maximizing financial outcomes, but on what felt expansive rather than contractive in her body, what created a sense of aliveness rather than obligation, what aligned with a deeper knowing that she couldn't articulate rationally, but could definitely feel energetically. This was absolutely terrifying for someone whose entire identity and sense of security was built around being the smartest person in the room, having the best analysis, and making strategic choices based on comprehensive information and careful risk assessment. But Elena had reached a point where her old way of operating was creating so much internal suffering that any alternative felt worth exploring, even if it meant risking her career, her financial security, and her professional reputation. The first major decision she made from this new place of trust rather than control was to leave her position at the investment bank. She had no clear plan for What would come next? No new job lined up, no business idea ready to launch. She just had this deep, unshakable knowing that her current work was no longer aligned with who she was becoming and what wanted to emerge through her. Her rational mind was screaming warnings about financial irresponsibility, career suicide, and the practical impossibility of starting over in her 40s without a clear direction. But something deeper than her thinking mind was completely calm and confident about this decision. It felt inevitable, like a wave that had been building. For years was finally ready to crest. Within 6 months of leaving her banking career, Elena found herself teaching financial literacy workshops to underserved communities. Work that had emerged organically through a series of connections and invitations that arose naturally when she started following her authentic interests rather than strategic career moves. The work paid a fraction of her former salary, but Elena had never felt more fulfilled, alive, or genuinely useful. She was finally using her financial expertise in service of people who really needed it, rather than helping wealthy clients become even wealthier. And remarkably, even though she'd taken a massive pay cut, her financial needs seemed to be met effortlessly through opportunities that arose without her seeking them out. Speaking engagements led to consulting projects. Consulting projects led to writing opportunities. Writing led to a book deal with a major publisher. Within 3 years, Elena had built a completely different kind of business based on her authentic passion for helping people develop healthy, conscious relationships with money. Her income had returned to her previous level, but the work felt like play, and she was making a contribution that aligned with her deepest values and sense of purpose. None of this trajectory could have been planned, predicted, or manifested through conscious intention and strategic thinking. It emerged through Elena's willingness to trust a deeper intelligence and follow the subtle guidance that arose when she stopped trying to control outcomes and allowed life to unfold through her. But here's the most important insight from Elena's story. This deeper intelligence wasn't separate from her. It wasn't some external cosmic force that took over her life and made decisions for her. It was her, just a much more expanded, connected, and wise version of herself than her personality, mind usually identified with. When you learn to trust this deeper intelligence, you're not giving up your personal agency or becoming passive. You're accessing a kind of power and effectiveness that's far more sophisticated than what your individual thinking mind can generate through effort and control. You're learning to move with the creative intelligence of the universe itself, to become a conscious participant in the quantum field of infinite possibility, rather than trying to manipulate circumstances from outside the system. This is what all the great wisdom traditions have been pointing toward, with concepts like surrendering to divine will, going with the flow of the Tao, or becoming a hollow flute for the breath of the infinite. They weren't talking about becoming helpless or passive. They were describing how to access levels of intelligence, creativity, and effectiveness that are only available when you stop trying to control outcomes and learn to dance with the deeper currents of reality. The quantum field of possibilities is infinitely more creative, intelligent, and benevolent than your conscious mind could ever be. It has access to information about timing, connections, opportunities, and synchronicities that exists beyond the limitations of individual thinking. But it can only work through you when you develop the trust and sensitivity to recognize and act on the subtle guidance that's constantly arising from your deeper awareness. This guidance doesn't usually come as dramatic visions or loud inner voices. It's more often a gentle pull towards certain choices, a sense of expansion around certain possibilities, a feeling of rightness that you can't explain logically but can definitely sense in your body. Learning to recognize and trust this guidance is perhaps the most important skill you can develop. not just for manifestation, but for living a life that feels authentic, meaningful, and aligned with your deepest purpose. The universe is not separate from you. You are not an isolated individual struggling to get what you need from an indifferent reality. You are a unique expression of the same creative intelligence that's orchestrating the entire cosmic dance, from the movement of galaxies to the blooming of flowers to the beating of your heart. When you remember this truth and learn to live from it, manifestation stops being something you have to work at and becomes something that happens through you as naturally as breathing. Not because you've mastered the techniques of conscious creation, but because you've remembered who you really are and aligned with the infinite creativity that's your deepest nature. The gap between your subconscious knowing and your conscious awareness isn't an obstacle to overcome. It's a sacred space where the individual mind meets the cosmic mind, where finite consciousness touches infinite possibility, where your personal dreams are woven into the larger dream of awakening consciousness. Trust the process. Trust the intelligence that's orchestrating your life in ways more beautiful and meaningful than you could ever plan. Trust that what wants to emerge through you is exactly what the world needs, even if you can't see the whole picture yet. You are not separate from the mystery. You are the mystery, awakening to itself through your unique perspective, your particular gifts, your individual expression of infinite creative potential. If this exploration has resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to Cosmic Sleep and continue this journey of discovery with me. And please share your own experiences with quantum manifestation in the comments below. When we share these stories, we help each other recognize the profound intelligence that's already operating in all of our lives. Sweet dreams. And remember, the universe is dreaming through you, and your dreams are far more powerful than you've ever imagined.